our series of Discover the World of Farming. We have 2 more left after this, and we're having them every Wednesday at 2 o'clock in March. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what is coming up at the library. So we have Coffee and Conversation on March 21st, that's Thursday at 2 o'clock p.m. It's a sit down, have a conversation with some experts. We're going to have a casual conversation on resources for brain health. So if you're interested in anything like that, come on down March 21st, Thursday at 2 o'clock p.m. We're doing that every 3rd Thursday of the month at 2 o'clock. We have an Iowa author coming to the library. We have a couple more books back there that you can check out. If you come to the library, you can check it out. Read her first book that we have for you, The Journey of Carolyn Olson. This is Anne Hannigan-Kotz, and she is going to be here to talk about writing her novels and also about Norwegian immigration to Iowa, because her book is it goes back to the 1880s up to the early 1900s, and then her second book takes off from the early 1900s all up after World War II. So that is March 25th at 1 o'clock p.m. She's going to talk about all of that. So in April, we have a solar eclipse coming. We're getting 80% eclipse in Iowa. So we are going to be making at the library take and go kits. So in your kits, you can get information on the eclipse. You can get eclipse glasses in there. Kits can be picked up April 1st through the 8th. The eclipse is happening on April 8th, and it's going to be happening from about 12:30 all the way until about 3:30 is the end. So if you're interested in seeing an 80% eclipse here in Iowa, you have to travel maybe about 3 hours or so to get a full eclipse in other areas of the country. Anyway, so I am so happy that we have the Clay County Farm Bureau working with us here today, and we have Troy Leininger, and we have Mike Maurer, and we have Casey Schomaker, and they're going to be here to be talking about harvesting silage and beef.
Well, I'm just gonna, there's a video that I like to show. I might wait till the very end that has some statistics about agriculture and kind of what kind of impact that agriculture has just on the world around us. But I'll show that some other time at the later, like maybe at the end even, because it's not that important to what we're gonna talk about today, but I thought maybe some of you folks would like to see some of the statistics that are tied to agriculture across the country. Then I'm going to have Mike start, and when he gets to the point of wanting to talk about the combine, I can run it, or if you want
I would say start with the combine.
Okay.
And then we can show the different things that come out of the combine.
Okay, because we have, I think we're okay. I think I can get up there. So we had questions about, Barb had some folks that were questioning her about how does a combine actually work? So we do have about a 6-minute video. In it, the farmer who is producing this video and his family, they're from the South, so he has a Southern draw. So it might be sometimes a little hard to understand over top of the sound of the combine, but they're going to slow the video down. You're going to see some stuff at real speed. Then they're going to slow the video down from time to time, and then they'll pick it back up again to real speed. And at the end, they do run it at the real speed all at the very end. So they're going to be in corn and soybeans. So I know that sometimes there's a question of how do you know which is which. Most of the time they're going to have corn that's being harvested, but they also have some shots of some soybeans, and we can try to point out the two. And Mike's even got some corn on the ear.
I've got ear corn, I got cracked corn, I've got silage, I have earlage.
Soybeans.
I've got soybeans, and so
We'll pass those around so that you guys can get.
We'll pass them around, and you can open them up and feel them and see what they are.
All right, so we're going to play the video here, and then you guys can maybe ask a few questions afterwards too. We'll just let it run its way through. We might point out to some stuff if we think that we can help contribute to the conversation here.
How many times have you driven by a field of grain ready for harvest or seen the massive machines in those fields harvesting the grain and wondered, how do those machines work? How is a machine able to take an entire plant and only keep one small part of it? How does it take this and turn it into this? The modern combine is an amazing machine. The name combine comes from the fact that it does 3 separate processes that used to be accomplished by multiple different machines and combines it into one machine. A combine cuts the crop, threshes the grain, and then finally separates the grain from the chaff. There are 3 main designs of combines. The original design, and the oldest, uses a cylinder to thresh the crop and then passes the crop to a set of straw walkers that shakes the grain from the crop. The newer design, which is more prevalent today, uses a rotor or twin rotors to thresh and separate the grain from the plant. The third design is a hybrid of the first 2. A cylinder threshes the grain where it is then passed to 2 rotors that separate the grain from the plant. Everything begins at the header. The header is an attachment that attaches to the front of the combine, cuts the crop, and moves the crop to the feeder house. There are several different types of headers that can attach to combines depending on the crop being harvested and different harvest conditions. In this case, we're using a corn head that follows the rows of corn and strips the ear of corn off the stalk. Different types of headers also include rigid and flexible platform headers, draper headers, row crop headers, stripper headers, and pickup headers. On a corn head, rotating knives grab the corn stalk and yank it downward between 2 steel plates called deck plates. The width between these plates is wide enough for a corn stalk to go through, but too narrow for the ear of corn to pass through. The ear of corn is stripped off and chains with lugs pull the ear of corn back to the auger. The auger moves the corn to the opening of the feeder house where it is fed into. The feeder house contains chain-driven slats that bring the crop to the feed accelerator. From there, it is transferred to the main threshing component, the rotor. The rotor is a 30-inch wide steel cylinder that spins inside of a cage called concaves. The rotor spins anywhere from 300 to 1,000 revolutions per minute depending on the crop being harvested. As the crop spins around the cage with the rotor, it rubs on the other grain and crop material and is loosened from the plant. This is called threshing. The concaves have holes in them sized large enough for the grain to fall through, but keeping the larger pieces of crop residue inside the cage. After the grain is threshed, it is thrown out of the rotor cage by centrifugal force. This is called separation. The crop flow through the concaves is controlled by the speed of the rotor and angled transport vanes. After the grain is separated from the crop residue, it falls onto the cleaning system. The cleaning system consists of a shaker pan and screens, which are called sieves. The sieves shake back and forth to stratify the grain in the chaff. Because of the shaking action, the grain, which is heavier, will fall to the bottom, while the chaff, which is lighter, will rise to the top. The sieves have slots large enough for the grain to fall through, but small enough that the larger pieces of chaff cannot fall through. Underneath the sieves, a fan blows air upward at high velocity, usually around 1,000 RPM. This air is enough to keep the lighter chaff suspended where it is blown out the back of the combine. The sieves are a 2-stage cleaning process with one sieve on top of another one. The upper sieve will keep the majority of the chaff from falling through. The lower sieve has smaller openings to catch any final chaff and keep it out of the clean grain. The sieves in this particular model are self-leveling. This keeps grain from flowing all to one side when the combine is harvesting on a hill and overloading the sieves and causing grain loss. The crop material that remained in the rotor cage is ejected from the cage and passes through a rotating drum with knives called a chopper. The chopper sizes the residue to promote faster decomposition and easier planting the following year. The chaff and crop material from the chopper are ejected into twin rotating discs called spreaders. The spreaders spread the residue evenly across the field. The clean grain falls through both sieves onto the clean grain auger. This grain is fed into a chain with paddles called a clean grain elevator. The elevator carries the grain upwards and dumps it into the incline auger. The incline auger dumps the grain into the grain tank where it is stored until it is unloaded. Now you've seen how a combine works in slow motion. Let's see how it looks at full speed. Now that you've seen how a combine works, maybe you can appreciate these massive machines the next time you drive by a field being harvested. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out our other ag videos on our YouTube channel.
So it can do 2 rows at one time? Is that what I was seeing? That when it goes down the middle, it...
That particular machine was doing 6 rows at one time.
Oh.
Yeah. You can do 12 rows of corn if you've got a big enough combine.
It takes a lot of horsepower
Yes.
in the main combine to process that amount of grain at once.
Okay.
So that was a combine harvester. In the old days, when you were picking corn, you picked it an ear at a time. You'd have everybody in this room would pick a row, and there would be a wagon being pulled alongside, and you would go along that corn stalk and you would grab that ear, strip it off there, throw it into that wagon, bounce it off a bang board, and hope you could hit a 6-foot area of a wagon. And so you end up with an entire ear of corn. And then they would take that back to the farm, and then it would go through a shelling machine, which would shell all the kernels off the cob, and it would, the cobs would be put into a pile that maybe somebody could burn in their furnace for the winter time.
Or they use it for bedding for livestock.
Yes, and then the corn itself would be fed to livestock, hogs, chickens, cattle, what have you. Your horses would eat it, that kind of thing. And then so that combine combined those 2 processes, the shelling and the harvesting. Or like if you were doing wheat or soybeans, like with wheat, it was called threshing. And so you would go out and you'd have a hand scythe, and somebody would be out cutting the wheat, and then be somebody right behind you grabbing those up, tying them into shocks, and stacking them to let them dry in the field. And then eventually you come back and you take them back to the farm and you thresh them. And that's where the term threshold is. You take them up to the barn, the wind would blow through, and you'd shake them and shock them, and the chaff would blow away, and the threshold would hold your wheat kernels or your oat kernels or barley. And so that's how it was. This combine combines those processes. So now we can go through a field with one machine, do it all in one shot.
And is it a different machine per different crop?
No,
just
same combine does.
attachments?
Same machine, but like they were saying, the header, what they put on the front of that. So you'll notice that the corn one had what they call snoots. And
It goes through each individual row.
the corn stalk would come through each snoot, where like on the soybean, it had a reel, it had a round thing with fingers that would bring that plant material into the cutting bar to be brought into that rotor.
Like with soybeans, you can follow the rows if you want. On our farm, we like to go across the rows because we get a much more even cut, and it just is smoother. You get more higher percentage of yield, I guess, and a much more even harvest, I guess.
In the video you saw when they were doing the soybeans, they weren't following rows, they were kind of all laid down, and so they were just mowing it practically like in your lawn.
That's pretty much what it is. You plant it one direction and then you take it at not 90 degrees by any means. You just a couple degrees off of parallel.
And so the yield too, so soybeans will yield how much bushels per acre?
I would say for Clay County, I think we're in the mid-50s is our average yield. And for corn, I think our average yield is in the 180s.
To 200?
Yeah,
So
but yeah, you can get up into the mid-200s, and beans you can get close to 80.
Yeah. So
Yes.
So the head of the corn, when they're processing the corn, the reason why they're saying up to 12 rows is because the corn plant generates 3 times the amount of kernels that we want to harvest than the soybeans. So there's just that much more corn to process at once.
Pull it down.
So that's why they can't have the big, huge heads like you see on some of the soybeans, because
A little harder to
again,
see.
it's trying to do all of that at once, and it takes a lot of horsepower. You know, you gotta have like, think about your lawnmower. You know, you can't, you don't want to do a 1 acre lawn with just a push mower, right? You want to get a bigger, bigger deck, and so it takes you less time.
So
and
like
less-
a 12-row corn head would take 25 feet of corn. That's what it's gonna take. A 6-row is gonna take about 15 feet.
Yep.
And so with beans, our smallest bean head on my farm is a 20-foot head. Our biggest is a 30-foot head. And we run 3 combines. We got a 20-foot, 25, and a 30-foot head. And so you can cover a lot of ground with that, doing beans. But you're taking in a lot less material and a lot less yield than what corn is. Whereas our corn combines, we run 2. We have an 8-foot and an 8-row and a 6-row corn head, or what we run. And so we're taking in considerably less amount of material, or covering a lot less ground, but it's just so much more bushels per acre that we're trying to harvest. So it's a little slower program harvesting corn than it is harvesting beans. And so it takes a lot longer to fill a semi with beans than it does to fill a semi with corn.
So how does field corn differ from sweet corn? You know, because you've all probably shucked sweet corn to eat it.
Pass it around.
Yep. So
That's
what would you say, Mike?
Sweet corn has a lot higher sugar content. It's bred that way, but field corn is bred to be a dent corn. If you let your sweet corn sit in the field, as long as we let our field corn number 2 dent sit in the field, it would turn into something very similar, just have a lot higher sugar content. But it's sweet corn, you take out probably what, 40-50% moisture.
You want to field a year corn?
Yeah, at least.
And whereas number 2 dent, you try and take it out about 15.
Right.
So they're very similar. You know,
There is also a white corn too, which is white corn is actually what we eat other than sweet corn. The white corn is actually putting in like corn flakes and things that you consume like that.
and then your popcorn is a completely different variety of corn as far as, there's 2 kinds of corn as far as, the corn that we have here is dent corn. And that was raised, that started in the 1800s. Before that, the Native Americans had popcorn where the kernels are round on the top and they have a harder hull than what our dent corn has. And so that allows it to pop. And that corn, when it dries down, it doesn't dent on the top. It doesn't make a square, rectangular shaped kernel. It's just round all the way around. Round on top, round on the sides, and conical. And so that's kind of the 2 different kinds of corn that we have, I guess.
So when you go home and get out your popcorn to pop it, if you still do it the old-fashioned way instead of just microwaving it, take a look at that kernel and think about how size difference and the shape is different. And that,
You could take this corn and put it in your microwave with some butter. It will pop, but it won't be as, there will be a lot less kernels popped than burned, like compared to popcorn. Popcorn, you have a very good ratio of edible corn that you're gonna pop, whereas this is gonna be, you're gonna have some burned kernels in the bottom of your pan or in the bottom of your bowl.
How do you decide when it's time to harvest both beans and corn?
Well,
I mean, I know the answer.
it's not a scientific thing by any means. When it comes to beans, I'll just tell you right now, I got a bag of beans here. These are soybeans. And when you go out into the field, you crack open the pod and you bite it. And if it snaps in your mouth, it's dry. It's ready to go. If it doesn't snap in your mouth, it's not ready to go. But if it's hot out, 2 hours later, it might snap in your mouth. But if it cracks If it cracks, it's good.
Or you can do a more scientific method where you take a sample to the elevator and you find out what the actual moisture content is.
Or yeah, you
But
can,
that,
we
but that
have
requires
that.
getting the combine out in the field and actually taking a sample, so if they're too wet, you could be throwing a lot of them out the
Yeah.
back, or you'll have a mush in the tank.
Yeah.
So this is a easy way to check if it's even getting close.
Now,
Well, on the corn, you can crack one and make a mess, but.
So, and if you think about it, and you kind of know
You
this,
don't have to clean it up, so make a mess.
and you guys know this from,
You can, if it shells off the cob just like that easy, you know it's dry enough to take to town. It's nothing to it. If it shells off, twist of the hand. It does that, you're ready to go. So,
Don't you kind of go by the dryness of the stalks too? I mean, like.
I have taken-
Then it's ready?
when the stalk looks like this, there's probably a pretty good chance, because this is the husk, but the stalk's usually the same. If the ears are sitting on the stalk, laying down like that, they're basically pretty close. That's when you want to start checking to see if you're ready to harvest. But I have harvested corn that is this dry, where it just comes right off the cob, and the stalk is still green. And so that's, and this is for number 2 dent. There's other things to harvest for corn. Like, for instance, about a month before we are even thinking about taking off corn, there's guys harvesting silage. And so if you guys want to pass this around, have a whiff of this, you sure can. This is the entire corn plant from,
You want to smell it?
I want to smell it.
Silent.
I smell.
you can smell it through the bag.
Yeah.
Changed.
It smells good.
Hasn't changed.
so,
What is a good moisture content? Like, people take their stuff in the elevator and say, oh, it only tested whatever. And so what is?
Moisture
Too
content,
dry.
Entire thing.
It depends.
you want it to be
On corn, it depends on if you're gonna sell it that
Oh,
day.
okay.
You can sell it at 15.
15.
If you want to store it, you gotta take it down to 13. Anything above 15, if you're gonna sell right away, you gotta pay drying and also shrink charges too.
and why, the reason why they want to do that is for storage. You know when you put something wet in food-wise, something wet in even like a baggie in your refrigerator, eventually it's going to get moldy and go bad. Where if it was dry, it would keep a lot longer.
which is exactly what this silage is. This is the entire corn plant, and it is the grain, the cob, the stalk, the leaves, everything, and then you put it in a pile and you pack it down as tight as you can, and then you cover it, and you want it to ferment, and then that increases the protein material and the nutrients that you can feed to your cattle. And so that takes the corn plant down. It leaves the stalk about this high off the ground, and then but you're taking the entire plant. And then another thing that you can do instead of doing silage is you can do earlage, and that is basically taking this whole ear when it is still very high moisture content. It's not dry, number 2 dent. It's still wet, and it's kind of like doing what the combine is doing, but you're taking the husk, the cob, and everything, and you're grinding it into this. And we can pass this around. You can have a whiff of it all.
And do you sell
This
the
doesn't.
silage?
This smells a lot better than silage. In my opinion.
Do you sell the silage in the earlage, or this is just for your farm?
This is for like just a farm. If you've got cattle, you feed that.
In your counties that have a high
Yeah, it smells.
high production, in your counties that have a high population of livestock,
Yeah.
the guys that don't have livestock, they just sell their, yeah.
But usually the farms that have a lot of cattle and traditionally always have cattle, then they prepare their own silage and handle it the way they want.
This is
The,
just the ears, not
The ears.
So I just kind of want you to think about, in the nutrition of the animal, what are some of the foods that you like to eat that are high in fiber? In your own diet, what do you eat to get fiber?
Carrots
Oatmeal.
beans, whole wheat, you know, and stuff like that. So this has got a lot of fiber or roughage for the cattle. So that's why, you know, that it's good nutrition for a beef animal.
Otherwise, you'd just be feeding the cattle just straight corn or cracked corn. This is cracked corn. And cracking the kernels helps the cattle digest it a little bit better. So this is basically it coming off the cob and then going through an additional process where it just cracks the kernels. And that helps the cattle digest it. Otherwise, you'd just be, if you didn't feed them silage, if you don't feed them silage, then you would be feeding them cracked corn and hay to give them the fiber that they need so that they have a balanced diet. It's just kind of, in a way, livestock are kind of like your pets. You want to make sure that they have a balanced diet. You know, they're like your children. I want to make sure my kids have a balanced diet. I don't want to just feed them only chicken nuggets. You're going to have some broccoli or some carrots here alongside of it. That, you know, whether you like it or not, this is your options. You know, you're going to get some applesauce possibly.
It keeps them healthier, it keeps their immune system, you know, keeps them growing. You know, you want to be as efficient with that nutrition in that animal as you possibly can.
Do farmers still build silos? No.
Not like they used to.
Not like the great big blue harvester silos.
Or even like what you see at the Jones's farm, you know, where they call Silo City, where they have all those concrete ones. Not much, because again, they've kind of gone more to those silage pits, you know, where they'll stack it up on the outside and cover it.
Yeah, they're called like a bunker silo, where it's concrete on three sides and it's, I don't know, about as high as the ceilings in this room, and then you stack it in there and pack it
You put all
down.
that, I've often wondered, you put all that silage in there,
Yep.
you pack it down, you cover it, and as it sits there, it ferments. So, like, as you're using it throughout the winter, does it get to the end and it's spoiled, or is it just much more nutritious?
It's more nutritious by
It's
the
actually
end. I
more
mean,
there's a dry.
it's on, you know, it is just,
What I do.
It never really spoils?
no.
Oh, okay.
That's why they keep it covered, so that it keeps anything bad from like ruining it, I
Yeah.
guess.
And not only that, but it's trying to get them through the wintertime a lot.
Either way,
You can feel it if you
either way,
This is what?
distiller's grains, it's what they get, this is the leftover product when they get done making the ethanol.
Because that's
From
something
corn.
that, not only does corn go in toward to feeding cattle, chickens, pigs, animals, we also make ethanol out of it. And that's what this distiller's grain is a byproduct of. You get the ethanol that goes into your gasoline, and then you get this that
Which goes
you can feed to cattle or hogs or whatever.
not so much into the hogs, it's more so into cattle.
Yeah. But you can still.
Well, they still do feed some in the hogs, but the hogs can't utilize it as well as cattle right now. They are working on an enzyme to actually make it more user-friendly to the hogs and actually to the chickens.
And we can get into the beef here if you want. Just feel free to step in, Casey.
Go ahead.
On this, with using the distiller's grains from the ethanol plant in hogs, it creates a softer fat on them that is not what the consumers want. Like, so imagine, you know, like when you open up a thing of bacon and that fat is just really soft and almost melting already. That's the type of thing that the distiller's grains creates. So they still kind of need to have the more traditional diet as opposed. So with the distiller's grains, then that's just all that's left of the corn. Or if they were, you know, with the corn, then that's what's left of that kernel after they've extracted everything, the starch out of it for cornstarch, the alcohol for the ethanol and the like. That, so it's mainly just, you know, just a little bit of the hull and some other things, you know, is mainly what that
It's
is.
high protein is what it is.
Yep.
And here's some products that maybe you guys are familiar with that corn goes into these kind of things. You get your sugars and
Yeah. If you look at
various
the back,
things
it's corn syrup.
that go into that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's in your moisturizing conditioner, and it's in your donuts and your packaging for your donuts. And wristbands goes into that. And I know you're wondering, how does it go into my brownies? Well, you get high fructose corn syrup. And everybody thinks high fructose corn syrup is the most terrible thing that you could ever consume. It's not that bad. It actually has less fructose than honey or regular sugar. They just call it high fructose corn syrup because if you were to take cornstarch and turn it into sugar, it would normally just be like 12% fructose. But when you add water to it, it makes a chemical reaction and it turns it into 42% fructose. So then they call it high fructose corn syrup. Whereas your honey and your cane sugar is 1-to-1, so it's 50-50. It's 50%. So high fructose corn syrup isn't the bad guy at all in this world. It's actually less fructose. If everybody's worried about fructose, trust me, that's not what makes you a diabetic by any means.
So how, do farmers set aside land or crops for silage? Because they know how much they're gonna need, or how does that?
They estimate how much they're gonna cut. My family doesn't raise cattle anymore, but I know plenty of other farmers that do have cattle, and they have X amount of acres. They know how many head of cattle they have, how many they're planning to feed through the winter. So they'll set aside this many acres, this is all gonna get chopped for silage. And so they'll do that, and then the rest, they might combine conventionally like we saw in the video. And
The ability to cut silage early when the plant is still green allows them to get into the field early so they can start the harvest process during the Clay County Fair instead of waiting until October or the first frost that would kill the plant totally down. So it helps with the drying process. Same with the soybeans.
Yeah.
So
in this past harvest was, we were so dry last summer, a lot of guys thought that it was still, they weren't ready for silage yet, and come to find out, their silage time had already passed. It was like, oh, I guess we missed the boat on that. We're gonna have
it was
to,
already too dry.
So then what happens then? Where do they get the food and this?
they have to use alternative methods. They have to just wait for it to dry, or they make earlage out of it because the cob itself and the corn is still wet enough they can make earlage, but you're not going to be able to take the entire plant because the entire plant's already dead because it was too dry.
So you want the moisture content in with the silage to make it palatable for the cattle to eat, because
it has
you
to
can
ferment.
take that same plant, separate it all out, and feed it to them, and they aren't going to eat it like the old silage. It's the moisture content that really, and the smell from it fermenting actually makes it really palatable to them.
So if you don't have cattle, are you worrying about silage to help neighbors, or?
On our farm, we don't do anything
So
with
you just
silage.
throw
We
it-
are strictly these beans and, well,
He doesn't crack the corn.
we don't crack the corn, but we get shelled corn, and we run a combine that takes it from a cob in the field, and it turns into just shelled corn. It goes to town, and we market it.
Mike, pass around the bags that I brought for the corn. He's been hauling corn and beans to the elevator, and this is what actually came out of our bin.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Used to be farmers picked the corn, the whole ear, stored it in corn cribs on the farm.
Yep.
So do some farmers still do that?
Yes.
And what is the benefit, or why do they do that and maybe feed their cattle just that?
That's where I got these ears, is from my uncle who has cattle, and he picks ear corn. This comes right out of his corn crib. It sits in there, stores and dries, and then he puts it in a grinder and grinds it. Corn kernel, cob, husk.
I'll go back to
This is what I use.
the corn for ethanol.
But I don't use
Almost half of the corn that we grow goes into ethanol
I just
production.
use
So
shell corn, and this is
that
what I
the ethanol industry is a big user of our corn products.
Where around here do you take that then?
So
Screen that's in it.
the various plants that we would have, like in Hartley, Valero,
Oh, okay.
Amherstburg with Poet.
Okay.
There's an ethanol plant in Galva, there's some in Minnesota, we've got them all around.
Okay.
So it's green, but it's not John Deere, is it?
No, it's
You have
not.
to alternate
It's
the
a
field
hammer mill
each year.
grinder, so you
'Cause I've
kind of
noticed
see the hammers. I didn't take pictures of that, but then it runs through the screen.
they always have that
And I just
one
use
field
shell
that they use for
corn,
silage, and I thought,
This
can
is
you
the feed
keep
that I
planting
use.
corn on the same?
Yes.
You can do continuous corn as much as you want. You
I
can,
thought it used to be you have to alternate.
on our farm, we alternate corn one year, beans the following year, and
Animals.
continue
And why
on.
do you do that?
What kind of?
Try and reduce
Cattle,
pests.
pigs.
Okay.
And it's good for the soil health. And beans put nitrogen into the soil, which corn is a heavy user of nitrogen. So if you do continuous corn, you have to apply a lot more nitrogen or manure to continue to grow corn on it over and over every year.
So there's nodules that are on the roots of soybeans that allow to put nutrients back into the ground that the corn likes. So that's why you would rotate. What?
The nodules are actually nitrogen.
Yep.
That's what it is.
It's nitrogen in a solid form on a bump on the roots. So that's why you have the corn-soybean rotation is the corn likes what the soybean roots put back in the ground. And it costs them less for fertilizer because the plant is naturally doing that. But if you need to do corn on corn, then you don't get to do that. But the corn, there are some farmers I know that have put corn on corn on corn on corn for 6-8 years.
I know some guys that have done it for 30 years. And they just continually did it. And then all of a sudden, one day, I was like, are they planting beans out there? I didn't know they had a bean planter. I thought they just always did corn.
The reason for the rotation too is to keep the disease pressures down. You know, in this day and age, we're having a lot more bug pressure.
Corn rootworm. and-
Corn rootworm, yeah, things like that. So those guys that are corn on corn for years and switch.
Or soybean cyst nematode.
Right.
We have pests in each crop, just like you guys have, maybe you get blight in tomatoes. And you don't want to put tomatoes back in the same area that had blight because that mold and stuff, the spores fall into that soil. And if you put tomatoes back in there, they're not going to do well. This is kind of what they're talking about.
Yeah,
If
that's
you
why
change,
you're right.
if you change the location of the crops over, then it kind of breaks the pattern up of the pests and the weeds sometimes.
And that makes it so we don't have to use as much insecticide and that kind of stuff. But I will say that the bugs are getting smarter and they are starting to figure out that it used to be the corn rootworm would lay its eggs in the same cornfield that it hatched out of because like, oh, plenty for me to eat here this year. Next year, my babies will be able to eat here. And then we fooled them and said, no, we're gonna plant soybeans. Now they're figuring out that, well, there's a soybean across the road there. Let's go lay our eggs over in that soybean field because I bet they're gonna plant corn over there next year. And by gosh, don't we all?
Mother Nature is an amazing equalizer,
She
right?
knows what we're doing.
And what they call it too is extended diapause. So instead of the eggs actually hatching the next year, they'll hatch the following year. So.
And then something else that we harvest that's not going towards feed or anything like that is where do we get our seed the following year? We gotta have seed plots. So like seed companies, they plant seed plots. And so this is seed beans and this is seed corn that we can plant this coming year. And so those plots are cared for heavily. Don't poke your nose, just.
Yep.
But they have a treatment on them
Right.
that helps to invigorate the seed and get the roots growing faster and,
So that's what the pink is.
yeah. 'Cause otherwise-
And that's what the green is.
Otherwise, these beans would look just like
Oh,
that.
okay.
This is what they look like coming out of the field, and then they put
Yeah, that's
Acceleron on them, and
So what's Acceleron?
Acceleron is it's a fungicide and insecticide that helps the beans from damping off. So if a farmer decides we have a very warm spring like we currently have, and you wanted to go out there and say, start planting beans tomorrow and try and beat the frost, all of a sudden it gets cold and wet. Beans like to damp off. That helps stop that from happening.
Damp off, what do you mean by damp off?
Damp off means they tried to sprout and come up, but then all of a sudden the soil temperature dropped lower than what they wanted to grow, and it didn't have enough energy in that seed
So then it dies.
to finish off, and so it dies before it can actually break the surface of the soil. So that's damping off.
Or they do pop up and then just die right away.
Yeah.
So,
And then you just missed out, or?
Yeah.
We gotta
You
go
have
back,
to
we gotta go
replant.
back and replant.
Yeah.
Oh.
gotta take the time of redoing everything all over
Yep.
again.
And you don't want to know how much this stuff costs.
Well,
Plus fuel.
interestingly, why don't you tell them how much seed
Yeah.
costs?
A bag of soybeans, which is 140,000 beans per bag, which depending on the farmer,
Or the
say
variety.
average, plants 1 acre. With the seed treatment, $71 a bag.
$71 a bag to do 1 acre.
And that's just for the seed. We're not talking fertilizer. The corn, I think it was like 344, 350, somewhere in there per bag, which depending on the population there again,
2.5.
a bag will do 2.3 acres.
And it depends on the brand of soybean and brand of corn that you're buying.
Yes.
I bought some corn that's over $400 a bag. I bought some as low as $200 a bag. It just depends on the brand.
So,
It's like if you want to buy Reeboks or Nikes or Adidas, you know, it's what kind of shoes are you wearing, what kind of corn are you planting, what kind of beans are you planting.
There is a big difference in the hybrids.
the thing that I was gonna add too is, so, like, if Mike were to have his boys have friends on the farm and they see this, it looks like candy, right? So
Yeah.
he has to tell the kids that come on the farm, do not put anything in your mouth that you find, because this is, you know, it's not candy.
Yeah.
So,
I've been handling this stuff for 30 years and I still have 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 feet. It's not dangerous, but I don't want you guys digging your hands through it either, so.
So I know I asked this last week too, so what caused you to go into farming? What?
My family's been farming here in Clay County since 1872, and so I'm a 6th generation farmer.
From little on, you were like, this is
Oh
what I
yeah,
want to do.
I've been following my dad around since, if you're old enough to walk, you're old enough to work, and that's how it was. It's something I always wanted to do.
Kind of the same way with him. I
Yeah.
grew up wanting to farm. I worked in town for several years before I was able to farm full time.
Let's get after the beef.
What do we need to know about the beef, Mike? Come
Well,
on.
come on.
did you have a question?
I just have a question about the corn. We have different
Yes.
soil up here, so compared to
Anywhere.
anywhere.
Yeah, because there's different soil types even just locally.
So do you plant a different kind of corn?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
There are hundreds of varieties of corn and beans, and maturities of them. Like corn, we range on our farm. We like to be in early and be done before it snows. We've been caught in a blizzard of 91 on Halloween, and all of a sudden you're trying to take the sieves out of combines and hoping you have a chance to get back into the rest of your corn before, you know, and you know, hope the snow melts so you can get it out. And so we plant 98-day corn up to 105 is about as long as we'll go. But they call it, up here, they call it full season corn, and that might be 112, 115 day. And that's the kind of stuff, like a full season corn, like 115-day corn, that might be something you'd see guys that are gonna cut some silage out of, because they know it's gonna get really tall and it's gonna have a lot of material to make a lot of tons of silage. Whereas they're not gonna be planting a 98-day corn for silage. It's just not. It's gonna be a lot shorter stature corn, and that corn is made to be planted, grow, be done on X amount of days, 98 days from germination. And soybeans, you go from, we've planted as early as 1.4 on our farm. That's what we prefer, is a 1.4, and we've gone up to 2.4, and they make them clear into the 3.0s that will grow up here, and you have a pretty good chance of them not getting frosted off. And a lot of people do plant like a 2.6 up to a 3.0, and we don't do that. My dad has always told me, we're always combining beans on my birthday, and if we're not combining beans on my birthday, then that's not a very good birthday present. So we plant early beans, so we're in the field on his birthday or before. And his birthday is the 21st of September. As soon as the fair's over, we're in the field.
Kind of like my wife, she's on 22nd, she, or 22nd, she always says that too. So. Go ahead, Mike.
No, have to be.
Well,
You're the cattle
I
producer.
actually got a clip or a piece of paper of where all the cuts of meat come from on the beef. Not a lot of people generally know that. I don't know, what do you guys want to know about beef production? We've been talking somewhat about it. Is there any questions?
I would say the difference is what you call the animals based on what they do, like a heifer and a.
Okay. I wish I would have had it on my iPad. Go ahead.
So,
I took some pictures of cattle. Go ahead, you start, yeah.
okay, so a heifer is a female cow that has not been bred. She's never given birth. And then a cow is a female that has had calves. And then you have your bull, which is a male, and he still has all his parts. A steer is a male that,
Has a couple parts missing.
yeah,
And
he's missing a badge.
And in the world of pigs, then the female that has not had a litter yet is get gilt, and then they become a sow, and then you have the boar, that would be the dad, and then the boar with parts missing would be what they call a barrow. So when you have a barrow show at the fair, it's going to all be males. If you have a gilt show, it's all going to be females, but they're going to be younger. So turn it back over to Casey. Back to you again.
Come stand up here by the middle of the room.
I'm standing over here.
What are some of the differences in the cattle breeds? Like when we see different colors of cattle, what is that?
Well, your black cattle are generally Angus cattle. And when you take them to the packing plant, if they have any black on it, they consider them Angus. Now, if you get a white face with black, that's considered Angus. Now, a black baldy, yes. You have red Angus, which is basically red and white, or they can be red and white, but mostly red. You have Maine Anjou, which are generally black. Herefords are red and white, the typical red and white. The picture I showed you, that was a Hereford bull on an Angus cow. So it leaves some nice markings. But the biggest thing whenever you're doing cattle, you want to get ready to gain, so you have your productivity. So you don't have to feed them so many, distillers or silage to that. Because the more product you have to put in them to make them big enough to get the market, the less money you make. So if you get that rate of gain up, the general rule of thumb, kind of industry average, is somewhere around 3 to 4 pounds a day is what you can get them to gain, which is quite a bit. Pigs are around 2, so you kind of see the difference on that. But two totally different sized animals.
What's the difference in size between a pig and a cow?
Pig today, nowadays, 10, 15, 20 years ago, they were wanting around 200 pounds to market. Nowadays, it's 280 to 300. Cattle, somewhere around, 1,300 to 1,500 pounds is where they want them at. Bigger you get the animal, the more meat you can get to market. But if you get them too big, then you get docked because the packing plant doesn't have capacity for those big animals.
So how long does it take for a pig to get the market size? How long does it take for a beef animal to get?
You had to ask me on the pigs.
This is a question for Ray next week.
Yeah, Ray would be a good one on the pigs, because I don't know, because all I do is just feeders on the pig side. So usually about, no, it's actually about 4 months. Depending on the size, if you get 90 pounders, then it's about 3 months. But cattle, it's usually about a year and a half to get them to market. From the day they're born till the day you take them to the butcher shop. Now, like I said, if you can get them to gain better than that, then you cut your time down, then you're better off. You make more money. Part of it you can do with implants. It's just a hormone that injects in their ear, and it just helps them grow, get more feed efficiency is all it does.
You talk about feeder pigs. Explain what a feeder pig is, and you just have those, you don't raise your own hogs or pigs?
I custom feed pigs. The pigs I get in are feeder pigs. They can be anywhere from generally no smaller than 40 pounds. You know, and I have gotten them up bigger than that. I think the smallest I've ever gotten is like 30, 35 pounds, which is really too small for the barn I have. That's a feeder pig. An isolene pig is a pig that is just a few days old to a week old. I think they're a week old, aren't they? Week, there you go. Week old. They take them off the sow, and then they get them started on feed. That's an isolene pig. Usually they take those isolene pigs, they have special barns for them that are designed specifically for them small pigs. Get them up to that 40 pounds, then you take them to the feeder finisher site.
So they're called a feeder pig because they've reached the age and size where they can eat the ground corn and the soybean meal that we put together for their food, and they'll keep going and growing into the market size. So you're going to feed a feeder pig till market size, but they've been weaned and able to be away from the mother, and they've reached a certain, like 40 pounds. 40 pounder is going to be kind of that size. So up to, when you see the pigs like what they're showing at the fair, the 4-H'ers and stuff, then, they're...
You gotta go farther.
They're quite a bit larger, but again, they're weighing 300 pounds. Some of those are even a little bit more.
They'll be about this tall, and when you try and put them in a semi,
Yep.
they will push and break your knee or your hip or make you sore for the rest of the day.
They've got 4-wheel drive, you don't.
Yes.
So,
And their head is always down to the ground, so they will get underneath of you and flip you over if they can.
pigs are very smart. They're smarter than dogs, and they have a very strong neck and face. So whatever they can get their nose under, they can lift up. And
They'll lift gates, they'll lift fences.
they'll lift you. So
They will plow a field.
Well, and that's why God made them that way, so they can root around in the ground and eat what stuff that's out of the ground.
That's why it's called, whether their noise is, it's called the root, 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 root. That's the noise they make, because they're running around.
And when you're doing chores, you never fall down in the feedlot with pigs, because you may not come out of there alive.
Yeah, they will eat.
That
you.
is the honest truth.
Now, you just raise, more or less, you've never had milk cows. You just raise the cat. Okay, so is there certain breeds that are better for beef cattle versus milk cattle?
Yes, there are. Your Holsteins and Jerseys are generally your milk cows. The Jerseys have more butter, or more of a fat content in their milk than a Holstein does. Holstein will give you more milk, but they don't have the butter content or the fat content is what I'm trying to get there.
And I don't know if you've noticed, like at the fair or even like on TV commercials and stuff, when they're talking about milk and dairy, then the black and white cows that look kind of like they've got, their hip bones are really prominent, that's a Holstein. And then the Jerseys and stuff might have a little more covering on them. They're not going to look as skeletal.
And a much smaller.
Yeah, and a lot shorter.
More brown tannish color.
Correct.
Jones Dairy has jerseys.
Yeah, Jones Dairy up north of Spencer, they've got Jersey cows.
So what do you call them cows that, all over the place, I don't know if it's east of town, but anyway, they have some cattle sometimes in their pasture that have this big white stripe. They're black.
Those around the middle?
Yeah.
Yeah, what are those?
The belted cattle or...
There you go, yeah. I guess I haven't seen those east of town.
Well, every so often they have some.
And a lot of them are, just
It's a really
crossbreed.
White stripe.
But,
Yes,
this is a.
Belted Galloway, if I remember
think so.
right. I think that's the breed.
They call it a belt because it looks like that they're wearing a white belt. And there's a breed of pigs, the same thing called a Hampshire, that are black with a white stripe and then over their front shoulders, and then they're black the rest of the way.
So generally in a confinement situation, you won't see pigs like that. They're just kind of a mix of the best genetics to get them to grow the fastest.
Most of the pigs that are going to market are white.
Yes.
There are some breeds that some people feel like the meat is juicier and may have a little more fat content. We talk like marbling in the steak and things like that, because that's a natural fat that's in the meat that makes it more tender. Then you may hear some people say that they wanted to get Duroc. They're going to go to the store and they're going to buy a particular Duroc cuts of pork, and a Duroc would be a red pig. And then there's also Berkshire, which is another kind of a black and white breed that the Japanese really like that meat because, again, it's juicier, it's got a higher fat content, but we export most of it. So
You can go to the grocery store and everybody's talking about, it's gotta be Angus beef.
Yep.
Angus this, Angus that. Honestly, I can't tell the difference between an Angus beef versus a Charolais or a Gelbvieh or a Limousine or a Baldy, any of those. They are a Hereford. Beef to me should just be beef, and that's what it tastes like.
You will notice in the milk breeding cows, you will notice a difference in terms of how they cut it. The size of like your steaks,
Yes.
your roasts, things
Because they
like
have
that.
different
Because like a
flavors.
Holstein, for instance, we used to raise them, used to buy them as, week-old calves, raise them up. But, when I was telling you about the regular beef cows, 13 to 1,500 pounds, the Holsteins, for instance, we got to take them up to probably 1,800 pounds because their frame is so much bigger than a regular beef cow. It takes more feeding that to get them up to weight to actually get a decent sized cut of meat out of them.
Because if you stand an Angus up next to like a Hereford, full size, as big as they're gonna get, the Hereford is gonna be way bigger than an Angus is. The Angus just has a smaller frame, but it puts weight on that much faster, so that's why a lot of people choose to go with Angus over Herefords, or same thing with Charolais, or name your breed of cattle. They all have a different structure and a different frame size, and they cover up faster, they gain weight faster, or at different paces.
And also too, in each breed of cattle, they do have their own temperament too. Red Angus, for instance, they can have a pretty nasty temperament.
So German,
Charlotte.
think German Shepherds,
Yes.
right? Why are German Shepherds used with police and security and the like? Because they're built for that. They're wired for that. Same thing with there's certain breeds of our animals that we have on the farm that might have a little more of an attitude than some are going to be bred to be, really laid back. You can think about some of your pets and some of those different pet breeds. You can, if I say that, think of an aggressive dog, there's going to be a certain breed
Chihuahua.
or two. Yeah, not going to be Chihuahua that would come to mind. Same thing happens with some of ours, but again, that just depends upon what you want to have on your farm and what kind of product you want.
I grew up with Chihuahuas, and I had a bloodhound. That Chihuahua is gonna bark at you all day long. That bloodhound, he's gonna just look at you and say, I suppose you know the guy that lives here. I'll let you in. That's fine. Unless you ring that doorbell, then I'm gonna howl at you.
So when you get a tough weight, for instance, is it because of the breed of cow, how it was fed, what?
There are several factors on
Probably
that.
just that particular animal,
What?
or how it was cooked.
Well, yeah. How it's cooked, how it was raised, what it was fed, and then if the animal's under stress. Meaning sometimes you can be the best caretaker in the world and have an animal that is just stressed the whole time. So there's several factors in that. Then sometimes too, it all depends on the pack or the butcher shop that's cutting meat too, There's different ways you can cut to make it a little more tender too.
Are you making a decision on what you're feeding them to make it be a better tasting? As a farmer, are you making that decision, or?
I do, yes.
So it'll taste better?
Because everything I raise actually goes to the butcher shop. I sell it all privately. So I go with straight corn fed with a little protein in it. Seems like you get a better, more flavorful, tender cut of meat.
It makes sense. That would be-
And in general,
And I'm not saying that feeding them anything else will do the same thing either. Part of the reason I feed them what I feed them is because it's available to me a lot easier because I run such small numbers. I can't go out and make a whole bunch of silage because if I don't use it fast enough, it'll actually go bad. So with grinding the corn like I do, it stays for a long period of time. I don't have to worry about spoiling.
usually if you have a tough cut of meat, it's usually overcooked. Just as a general statement.
Yeah, as a general statement, yes.
Yeah, that it's just been, they could have pulled it a little sooner or let it rest. By that, you take it off of the heat, you just let that piece of meat just sit on the plate for a while, and it allows it to relax and let the juices go throughout the whole piece of meat. Sometimes one of the last things you want to do is take a pork loin or a steak and cut it right away as you take it off. Just let it sit on the plate or on the counter for a few minutes, and just let it relax, is what they say. That'll help let that moisture in that meat go back through it again, and it will be much more juicy.
Talk about your cow calf herd. When you begin to.
Well, I just have a small cow calf herd. Everything that I calf, I take to butcher, and only have 9 head. I don't know what else you want me to say.
How long can you keep a cow? How long does it blow? How long, all that kind of stuff.
Well,
Beef had three stomachs.
4.
Was it
yeah.
4?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, see, I wasn't.
They're a ruminant animal.
Yes, they are. I don't know, last bull I think I had him 5 or 6 years. And the reason I got rid of him is because I wanted to keep back some of my heifers. So, you can't put a mother with a father. And so then I bought a different bull, and that's what I have now is that Hereford, which I showed the picture. I got some black white faces now coming out. So, predominantly I just feed grass in the summertime, small pasture, and then in the wintertime when I take them off the pasture, I just feed them grass with a little bit of grain or distillers. We had some of that wet distillers in here. I get it in dry, so it will last. If you get it wet, you got a very short window to use it, especially if the temperature's warm. It'll spoil on you. Anything else? Yes?
How long do you keep a cow?
Either keep them until he dies or their teeth are gone.
Which is
And
how long?
which is, 10, 12 years sometimes. It depends on how much chewing they do to wear down their teeth.
I was just wondering, you said if you took a cow to the butcher shop and it was over a certain weight, they would dock you for it.
Not the butcher shop, the packing plants will.
Oh, so like if it gets over a certain weight, does it just gain more fat? Or is it just?
It depends
what
on,
happens if it's-
it depends on the breed of the animal. Some animals will get fat. Some animals will get a little bit more fat and more meat. It just depends on the genetics. That's the biggest thing, is the genetics. See, we used to raise cattle for the fair. And part of the dependence of 3 at the fair, they'd actually take an ultrasound, and then they ultrasound the ribeye and the coat of fat, and there's 1 or 2 other things. But the biggest thing was the ribeye and the coating of fat. And you got scored on that too, and like I said, the genetics is a big thing of how big that ribeye is going to be.
That's what the USDA inspector looks at when you take a cow to the locker or to the pack. They cut it at the 5th rib, and a USDA inspector takes a look at it, grades how much fat's on there. So you're going to have prime is going to be your best cut, or they'll grade it choice, and then select, and then cutter or canner. And that's all based on how much marbling is in that meat at that rib section.
And the prime is the best marbling,
Yes.
because that's where you get the most tender kind of meat.
So these big animals, like the Iowa State Fair, you try to raise the biggest,
Boar, bull,
Are they-
ram.
what do you use them things for?
The biggest
They get
animal,
so big.
the biggest animal isn't meant for the packing plant.
Yeah, that's just for bragging rights.
Those are actually either be a boar or a bull, and they use them for breeding.
Yeah.
Is what they use them for. And they don't actually physically let them breed other animals. They actually get the semen out and do
Artificially
AI.
inseminate.
Yes.
Because they're too big.
That big?
Yeah, because they're too big.
Yes, they're too big.
They're way too big practically. You wouldn't let an animal get that big on your farm because it is too big for what its function is.
The only reason would be like in the early 1900s, we used to let pigs get to 1,000 pounds, but the reason was that pig's only gonna produce so much meat, the rest is gonna be fat. Well, you can use that fat and you can use it to make light, or you can use it to grease axles. You can use, the fat was
For lard or whatever.
was a very, very valuable asset, more so than the meat was at some point. So they just get them as big as they could, and then that fat was almost as valuable as meat.
We're about out of time here, looking at the clock. So any more last questions or anything that?
Well, your population, that's.
I'm gonna show you this
Okay.
video, yep.
Oh, okay, very good.
So I do presentations to elementary and middle schools, and this would be some of the stuff that I showed them in trying to get them prepared. Like I just did a middle school ag career day down in Odebolt Arthur's, in Odebolt at the middle school for OABCIG. We're trying to tell the kids about agriculture, let them know that that industry needs them as workers, even if they don't have the farm. There's so many other people that support the farmer that we want them to look at that. They don't have to go away to find a career. They can stay locally and help agriculture locally. just some stuff that, you know, some statistics to throw out there that you may not have known or thought about. What's interesting, like in Sac County, Sac is the largest producing county in the state. Sac produces more turkeys than any other county in the state. So that's some trivia you can take with you and stump your friends with. So, all right, so thank you for coming. We really appreciate you. Maybe invite a friend next Wednesday at 2 o'clock and see what else you can learn about agriculture. Bring your questions. I know Barb said that after last week, she had people would stop her and ask her, well, what's this? What's this? You talked about this, but what about this and this and this? So yeah, write them down, bring them next time. So we're just trying to get, you know, some information out to you from the people who actually do it and the reasons why they do it, so that you can get.
We're less than 2% of the population, so 98% of the people don't know what we are doing. So,
Yep. Thank you.
And then make judgments that are not well educated.
Yeah, we deal with that every day.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for coming.